think what we'll do is when the YouTube live stream starts, we can make a start, and then Councillor Garinga can join us after the introduction. Cool. Okay. Thank you very much. So my name is Councillor Drew Heffernan, and I'm the chair of the Planning Committee. I'd like to welcome everyone to this virtual meeting of the Planning Committee on today, the 2nd of September 2020 at 7:30. And the vice chair of this meeting is Councillor Kevin Burke, and if I lose my signal at any point over the next couple of hours, he'll take over the chair. This meeting is now being live streamed on YouTube, so welcome to everyone who's joining us on there. And that YouTube stream will be available after the meeting so that people can catch up if they want to. Before we begin, just got a few housekeeping things to go through. First of all is that I'll give everyone plenty of time to speak during this evening, so please don't speak over each other, and please wait for me to bring you in. If you do want to come in, you can please use the chat box function, and I'll come to you as soon as possible. If you've got a point of order, I'll come to you straight away if you raise that on the chat box as well. If we need to, I know we've only got 2 items on the agenda, but if we do carry on for a while, we might have a short break in between just so we can have a comfort break. But as we now begin the meeting, what we're going to do is ask the clerk to confirm which members are present. If you also have any declarations of interest, if you could raise them at the same time. Good evening, Peter.
Evening.
Oh, sorry, Sharon.
Thank you, Chair. So the people that I can see in the meeting room at the moment are Councillor Kevin Burke, Councillor Richard Clare, Councillor Vincent Galligan, Councillor Amy Haldane, Councillor Jill Whitehead, Councillor Eric Allen, Councillor Peter Garinga, Councillor Tony Shields, and Councillor Tim Foster, and of course yourself, the Chair. So everyone is present and correct, and there are no apologies for absence.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have a declaration of interest for any of the items here tonight? If you can just let me know in the chat box, I'll give you a few seconds. No, doesn't look like it. Okay, that's fine. The next item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the previous meeting, and those are available on page 328 of your pack that was circulated recently. If you've got any comments on that, can you raise them in the chat box, or if not, just write approve in the chat box, and then we can move on to the next item. Okay, well, that's the majority of people. So I'm going to take those as approved, and I will sign those when social distancing restrictions are lifted. Thank you very much. And we now move on to the next item of the agenda, which is the planning applications. So for each of these items, I'm going to ask officers to present on the application. Officers for that will display some slides on the screen and then talk us through them. After that, I'll ask if any members have questions of officers. So if you could wait till the end, that would be great. And then we'll move to written statements and presentations from interested parties before we move to debate and then vote. So if we can now move on to agenda item 5, I think Sarah is going to present on Richmond House.
Can I just check that you can see the slides? Okay.
Yeah, I can see them.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Sarah Buxton, the Deputy Planning Manager. Before we start the presentation, I would like to advise members of the committee on the following. An additional letter of representation was received from 17 Richmond House, which includes concerns in regard to the security of Richmond House, landscaping, the external staircase from the basement, and cycle storage. The contents of these representations do not raise any material considerations which have not already been addressed within the committee report. In addition, the recommendation at the top of the committee report should read, subject to conditions and the completion of a Section 106 agreement by the 11th of September 2020, amending the date from the 4th of September 2020 to complete the Section 106 agreement should the application be approved. Agenda item 5 relates to Richmond House, 93 Sherbrook Way, Worcester Park. The original building on this site is known as Richmond House, comprised of the final phase of the wider Hamptons redevelopment. The wider site of the Hamptons comprises of 645 homes in a mixture of single-family dwellings and flats in mixed tenure homes arranged to the east, south and west of the Mayflower Park. The wider Hampton site provides a nature reservation, ecological wetland habitat, and recreational paths and spaces. The original outline for the entire Hamptons site was approved in December 2002. Since 2002, a series of reserved matters and full planning applications have been submitted for the development of the site. Following refusal of an application in 2008, an appeal was submitted and subsequently allowed in July 2009 for the remaining phases of the development, part of which included the standalone building known as Richmond House. This development was completed in 2011 and included Richmond House, a single building of 4 stories comprising 23 shared ownership apartments with basement parking, refuse and cycle storage. In September 2019, Richmond House was subject to a major fire and as a result, 23 homes were lost. These pictures show views from the north where Richmond House stood and where the proposed building will be located. The second picture shows views to the east of Sherbrook Way. These pictures shows views to the south and the southeast of Sherbrook Way. And these pictures shows views west of Sherbrook Way. And you can just see in this picture, that's where Richmond House was. And you can also see this path here, that is a pathway that leads to the Mayflower Park. And these 2 pictures show Richmond House prior to the fire in 2019. Planning permission is sought for the replacement of the previous building in this location by a 3-storey detached building with accommodation at roof level and basement vehicle parking to provide 23 self-contained residential units together with the provision of detached cycle and refuse stores. The footprint and design of the original building is proposed to be the same as a previously approved and seeks to provide a building which will be similar in its external and internal appearance and includes some minor internal and external changes. As a result, the proposal includes an extension to the front of the building, which is positioned here, which will accommodate an escape staircase from the basement, along with minor amendments to the external staircase. The application also proposes some additional changes to meet the current building regulations, which include obscure glazing, which you can see here, and that will be located to the ensuite windows of units 6, 12 and 18. These are located on the front elevation. Changes of materials to the balustrade of the balconies from timber to metal, with the appearance matching the original in style and colour. The removal of 2 louvers from the lower ground floor. There will also be some minor changes at the entrance for post boxes, additional lighting and secure access. There will also be minor amendments to all of the bathroom layouts so that they comply with Part M of the building regulations. And you can see here from the proposed lower ground floor plan that this area is the extension to the front of the building to incorporate the escape staircase, and this is the external staircase from the basement. The application also proposes to extend the cycle store to provide 29 space two-tier bike rack, which will accommodate a total of 58 cycle spaces and a revised car parking layout, which will retain the previous 26 car parking spaces. All of the units will be affordable shared ownership, which will be managed by Metropolitan Thames Valley Housing Association and will provide replacement homes for those people displaced by the fire. The landscaping surrounding the proposed development will follow the previous arrangements and provide a mixture of trees, shrub planting and lawns. As such, it is considered that the proposed replacement building, known as Richmond House, which was lost to a fire in September 2019, which will provide a building similar in its external appearance with some internal and external alterations, and will maintain the New England character of the Hamptons development. The proposed use is consistent with the established use of the surrounding area, which comprises the residential development known as the Hamptons. The proposed development would not result in loss of amenity to adjoining residential occupiers by reason of loss of daylight, sunlight, sense of enclosure, loss of privacy and noise. The proposal provides replacement car parking to serve this part of the Hamptons development, and the proposed development would not adversely impact on the existing highway network surrounding the site. The application would not give rise to environmental concerns in respect of flooding, biodiversity interests and trees. Chair, as such, it's therefore recommended that planning permission is granted, subject to the recommended conditions and the completion of the legal agreement of the amended date of the 11th of September 2020. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you. I'm going to open the floor now to any questions. If you've got any, if you can just indicate on the chat. Councillor Whitehead.
Yes, bearing in mind that this building did go up in flames, I wonder if you could outline what are the improvements to prevent future conflagration, please.
Okay, there will be a new internal escape fire escape from the basement. I'll just drop back, and that will be located here. The application will also need to be processed through building control, and that will include a fire strategy that will provide details of any fire installation, sprinkler systems, the materials to be used on the building, and that will all have to go through a design process. As I said, that will be processed via our internal building control officers, who will ensure that it meets current building regulations and that it meets any fire standards in place at present.
And follow up to that briefly, could I ask, there's an item in the agenda that refers to timber frame building, that the original was timber frame, and about whether it would be timber frame this time. I wonder whether you can answer that.
I believe at the moment that hasn't been confirmed whether or not it will be timber frame or not, and that's something that would be part of the design process for building control.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Foster.
It's a very simple one. If this is a replacement building, I would assume that we had some form of Section 106 agreement on the original build. I'm just wondering why we're looking at Section 106 on this.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, there was a Section 106 for the original development, and this is just to tie, the Section 106 will tie this application into the original agreement, so it forms part of the whole wider Hamptons development Section 106 agreement. It doesn't include anything conditional that was in the original one, and all those items and the heads of terms would have been met by now.
Councillor Foster, do you have a follow-up, or does that answer your question?
That answers my question. I have the same disquiet, I think, of Councillor Whitehead about the safety of the building, but that's maybe something will come out within the context of any specialist or any further presentations.
Thank you. Yeah, we do have the applicant later, so I'm sure you can ask the question then. Councillor Garinga.
Thank you, Chair. Funny enough, it seems to be the same question. I just wondered, do we normally get a situation where they don't actually know what materials they're going to build it in? It's almost like sort of outline planning rather than planning. I mean, what would be the reason for control to turn around and say, oh no, I think we'll do it in a different form other than timber?
In the process of a planning application, an applicant will advise what the external appearance will look like. Then when we come to the building control element of an application, which does follow on from a planning approval, that's where the details will have to comply with the building control regulations. So within that, they'll have to meet certain criteria. As far as I'm aware, it doesn't restrict any buildings being built from timber. There will obviously need to be certain regulations met to make sure that it's compatible with their fire strategies. We do also have Anthony Morcham on the call, who may be able to go into a little bit more further detail. He's one of our building control officers.
Thank you, Sarah.
Would you like me to comment on that, Chair?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, please, if you don't mind.
Yes, as the regulations stand at the moment, it is possible for the applicant to build in either timber or masonry. Whichever way it's done, it has to be done to certain standards. The regulations are quite specific, but at the moment, the applicant has those two choices.
Thank you. And I think we'll move on to Councillor Garinga.
Right. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, we've been told that they're not sure what sort of construction it's going to be, whether it may be timber or something else. We know what happened to the last timber building because that's why we're here today. So can we be assured that if it is going to be a timber frame, that the timber is sort of fireproofed or whatever can be done to ensure that, you know, this thing doesn't happen again? So, you know, can the timber be treated in such a way that it ain't going to go up like the last lot did?
Okay, so I'll ask Sarah to just go over maybe the process again and who will be checking it and how that will be checked, and then I'll move on to Councillor Allen, if that's okay. So are you okay to just briefly recap?
Yep, that's fine. So should the application get approval tonight, they will need to put in a building control, a full process for their design strategy. And that will be their final construction method, which will select the design structure. That will be assessed by building control, and there are regulations within building control that they will have to meet that will ensure that the building is fireproof in a sense. So there will be additional items that can be installed, sprinklers. There's the additional safety aspect of the staircase from the basement, and I believe that this time they will be using Sutton's building control department, who will be checking that process as it goes along. And if Tony, if that's all correct.
Yes, that's entirely correct, Sarah. If timber is used, it will require to be properly fireproofed and protected. And on this occasion, we also are going to have sprinklers, which is an additional protection. So there is no reason why it wouldn't be perfectly safe. Thank you.
Andy, is there anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, just I want to try and give complete reassurance to members this evening. It's with kind of, you know, a positive message that I convey this, that the developers are working very closely with building control at Sutton, who didn't look after the building regulations for this phase of the development that went through, you know, back in 2008 on appeal. So I am sure in terms of the highest standards of construction, it'll be something that we'll be pressing for, but this will come out through the building regulations application. But as Sarah has indicated, there have been some changes in this application. She's mentioned the escape stair from the basement, but also 2.12 of the report, there's a reference of the balustrade detail on the balconies being changed from timber to metal. So I think every effort is being made to ensure that this building is safe and future-proofed against current building regulations. So I think members, you can have our assurance on that we're working very closely with St James on this to make sure that this building will be constructed to the highest possible standards of fire safety.
Thank you, Mr. Weller. Councillor Allen, do you want to ask a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think both Sarah and Andy have actually answered the question which I was about to ask. As you know, I'm a member of the Local Government Association's Safer and Stronger Communities Board, and one of the issues which has been debated at nearly every single meeting has been Grenfell. And you can imagine that last year when this came up, and Sutton was in the headlights for having a building which went up in flames very quickly, that this was discussed in some considerable detail. The main point which came out of that is the fact that Sutton Building Control didn't actually do the building regulations work on this. And I think what I would be very concerned about is that if we don't put a condition on this application that the building control must be Sutton and not an independent again, otherwise we're leaving ourselves open to another disaster coming through in the future.
Councillor Allen, sorry, Chair, if I can come in, Andy Webber, Head of Planning. I don't think a condition to that effect would be legally enforceable, but as I said, I am responsible for both the management of planning and building control at Sutton, and I've been having a number of conversations with St James at the outset of this when they first came in to talk about the works that were needed, not just for Richmond House, but the remedial works across the whole of the estate. So, Councillor Allen, you know, I can give you my assurance that we are already in advanced discussions with St James about building regulations, not just for Richmond House, but for the whole of the Hamptons estate. So you can have my reassurance on that, Councillor.
Well, you have my reassurance that I'd be very happy if it is Sutton is doing it, but I wouldn't be too happy if it was an external contractor again.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Whitehead, you've got another question you want to come in with?
Yes, it's a follow-up to that, really. When we had the Grenfell inquiry, what emerged from it was that the builder undertook some shortcuts, and instead of the materials that they were going to build, they used cheaper materials. So presumably in using our own building control, we can check that the right materials are used and there are no shortcuts made, so that different materials are substituted for the original ones.
Absolutely, Councillor Whitehead, and the fact that, you know, planning and building control are working very closely on this, and the fact that we've got Tony Mottram, who's a joint head of building control at Sutton, with us this evening, hopefully will give you that reassurance that this is a very much a joined up response, because I think we all owe it to the residents of Richmond House and the Hamptons in the wider context to make sure we get this right.
Thank you. And I mean, can I just say as well, so I'm the ward councillor for this application, and I know that a lot of work has gone in from the council up to this point in working with both the residents and the applicant to try and make sure that this is done in the best way possible. And I'm confident from what I've seen that going forward that will continue. And so if I can add that to what has already been said, I think it can be useful. Councillor Garinga, do you want to come in your question again, and then we'll move on to taking some people from the applicant as well. Councillor Garinga.
Thank you, Chairman. I believe it was said that some of the victims of the fire will be rehoused there again. Was I right about you saying that?
Thank you, Councillor. They have the option. All residents from the 23 units have been offered another unit in this. I think at present 3 have decided to go back, and that offer is still open until the building is complete.
Yes,
So,
the second part of the question was this. Have any points been raised by any of the residents who were in the previous fire and who may wish to return to the new building? Have they raised any particular points that, and as a result of that, what have you done about them?
So there have been 3 letters of representation. 2 are referred to within the committee report. One was from a resident from the building, and another one, as I mentioned in my introduction today. A lot of their concerns were in relation to fire strategy and the materials, which we have outlined in the objection section of the report. There was also some questions on the internal staircases and external staircases, whether or not there were going to be any additional put in. As the committee report states, that there is an additional escape staircase, and that will be from the basement, and that is what's included in this front extension. There's also then the original external staircase from the basement, and the applicant advised that they wouldn't be putting in any additional, because this would then start to change the look and size of the building. So they've opted not to do that, but they are happy with that there's an additional fire escape from the building. There was a couple of comments in regards to designing out crime. As I mentioned in my presentation, there are going to be some additional lighting to the front of the site, and there's also going to be some changes to the post boxes here. You will see from the committee report, there is a condition that the applicant will need to put in information in regards to designing out crime, and there's a couple of items there that have been listed by the designing out crime officer that the applicant can take on board, and that's in relation to the access to the car park and any additional lighting that can be added to the site.
The reason I asked that question was really, there's nothing to say that the questions came from the previous people who lived there. That was all. I mean, you've got letters received, but you don't say from whom and how they were connected with the building. So that's why I asked the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. What I'm going to propose we do now is move on to hear from the applicant, who I believe has joined us. Do we have the applicant on the call? Lost my speaker just now. So we should have Steve, Michael and Lucy Bird.
Yes, you've got Mr. Michael on the call.
Good afternoon, good evening, Mr. Michael. Can you hear us? I think you're muted.
Michael, to unmute your, you need to unmute, so it's Control D and Control E, so we can access your camera and your microphone, please. You could try moving your cursor to the bottom of the screen and you'll see a picture of a microphone to click on, if that helps.
Sharon, do we have a phone number for Mr. Michael to see, so we can give him a hand? Should we?
It's okay, Cassie's just phoning him actually at the moment.
Okay, sure. Okay, we're about ready to go live again.
Yeah, we're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Good evening, Mr. Michael. Thank you for joining us. What's going to happen is we're going to give you have 4 minutes to address the committee. Okay. And then after that, if it's okay, some of the members might have some questions for you. So the timer will start whenever you begin speaking, and then I'll let you know as you're on the phone when your 4 minutes are up.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, are you ready for me to go? Yes.
Yeah. So the time will start whenever you begin.
Okay, all right then. So I'm Steve Michael. So I work for BB7 and we're a fire consultancy company, and we focus on fire safety design, fire risk assessment, and fire safety management. And our involvement in this project, we've been appointed from concept stage all the way through to completion of the building and handover on completion. At this stage, we've developed a concept fire strategy, which looks at all the proposals for the design throughout the building, and this looks at the evacuation strategy and safety of occupants within the building. It also looks at the compartmentation levels and how this will be applied to the building. So at this stage, it's conceptual, so we're not going into detailed design, but we do know the levels of fire resistance required within the building and to various elements of the building. The design will take account of the current building regulations guidance. So the building regulations updated guidance came out in 2019 and is due to be renewed again in November this year. So the concept strategy will take account of the previous updated guidance and also recommendations in the new guidance that's about to be developed. One of the big changes in the design, I think, for this particular building will be the provisional sprinklers. So this is an over design for the building because it's not required under current guidance. So sprinklers will be installed, and it's considered one of the big fire safety features for the building. We've developed concept designs for the fire alarm and detection systems, and we've also consulted the London Fire Brigade on water services for the building. So the provision of hydrants and water supply will be in full accordance with the London Fire Brigade recommendations. They have looked at the site and are aware of the current hydrant provisions, and we understand that the hydrants are satisfactory as they are, but of course if they do require additional hydrants, then these will be installed. In terms of the general design of the building, it will contain a single staircase from the residential flat. This will be protected by appropriate lobby and smoke ventilation provisions. It's fully in accordance with the current guidance, and also will be in accordance with the guidance later to come out later this year. I think in general that sort of gives an overview of our fire strategy concept document, and that will be developed in the next stage, which will be in the detailed design for the plan application.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you. That was 3 minutes. That was 3 minutes 23. That's perfect. What I'm going to do is ask if any members of the committee have questions, and then I'll bring them in.
Okay. Thank you.
Does anyone have anything for Mr. Michael? The first one is from Councillor Foster. Councillor Foster, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah. The fire last year, and I'm only going from the reports, what was I've been trying to find today, researching for this evening's meeting, a report on the fire, the causes thereof, and I can't find very much. Can you just elaborate for my benefit what actually was the reason for the speed of the fire and the cause of the fire last year?
There has been quite an extensive fire investigation carried out, but the conclusion of that fire investigation is that the cause is still unknown. So they've not been able to pinpoint the specific cause of that fire. We do know that the fire did spread, and there were combustibles on balconies that helped the fire to spread. And I think we're aware that there were some deficiencies in fire cavity barriers within the building that may have helped the fire to spread. But the actual cause of the fire is still unknown.
Just following up on that, if you don't know what caused it, how can you how can we actually take remedial action? Because effectively it's the same design. An additional staircase for escape didn't seem relevant because everybody got out, and steel balustrades rather than wooden ones doesn't necessarily stop combustibles being left on the balconies. I think I'm voicing concerns that others voiced, that we're starting all over again with the same design and not knowing exactly what the issues were, because I presume the last one was built to buildings regs.
Yeah, I think we always base the strategy on the assumption that a fire may occur. There's many reasons for fires. It may be electrical, it may be smoking, it could be candles, etc. So I think we can never sort of say there will never ever be a fire again. All we can do is try and design to allow for when a fire does occur, to make sure the safety of occupants is paramount, and to try and contain that fire. So the current design or the current strategy will be based on the very latest BIM regulations and the guidance, and that's very much based on containment. So each apartment would be a fire compartment designed and constructed to contain the fire in the origin of its location, and the means of escape for the occupants is also a fire protected route with smoke control, and it's a low-rise building which allows us to use the single stairway that it currently has. In fact, you can still build up to over 30 metres in a single staircase. So this is very much a safer building than you typically have with a high rise.
Councillor Foster, do you have anything else, or can I move on to Councillor Garinga?
Nothing from my point of view to add.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Garinga.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not asking about the cause of the fire, but I am asking why it spread so quickly. It burnt down probably much quicker than Grenfell, and luckily everybody got out. But why did it spread so fast? That's the question I want to have an answer to.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Michael.
Okay. I think from the fire investigation, it's not entirely clear is the true answer, but obviously we're aware that there were cavities within the building that did allow some fire to spread via the building and via the roof void, and the roof void was uncompartmented. So there was some issues there which allowed the fire to spread, but the fire investigation is not conclusive on those aspects. And this is the fire investigation carried out by London Fire Brigade.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from other councillors for Mr. Michael, or did we want to move on to debate? I'm just going to give a few more seconds to see if anyone wants to add anything. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Michael, for coming here tonight. Sorry we had some trouble getting you to join us, but I'm glad that we finally got to get you on the call. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Apologies for the technical difficulties.
Yeah, that's all right. That's fine. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We're going to move on to debate now. Councillor Shields, are you indicating that you want to start the debate off?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Realistically, we're looking at that's why I've been quiet all the way through this. We've got a great undertaking to have a better building, albeit very similar to the previous building. Discussions of the downfalls of the previous building are not really a matter for a future-facing planning committee. However, I will be voting for this, and as with Councillor Foster, I would agree with him that we have the comfort of having an in-house team to see this through from design to completion, with safety being the paramount issue. So I will be voting for this.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Galligan.
I agree completely with what's been said before. I think the problems that you have in building when the control is done by another, we can see all over the place some of the things that have been built. And to know that it's going to be controlled in-house, I think is what will make this a better building. We've got to make sure that there aren't gaps, and we do need enough building control that can get out there and make sure that the builders are doing it properly.
Thank you. Councillor Burke.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with Councillor Shields' comments. Looking retrospectively at what happened with the previous fire isn't a job for us here, and it's I think this has been quite carefully thought through with residents in mind, and I know that they've been involved at every stage, which is good because they'll be going back into the building, and I think the fact that it's got sprinklers in it is a really comforting thing to know that there's a sprinkler system, even though apparently it's not required, which takes my breath away, but there we are. So I'll be voting for it as well.
Thank you. Councillor Whitehead, do you want to come in, and then we'll probably move to the vote on this one?
Yes, I just want to say that I agree with everything that's been said. I think the in-house building control is the answer to this. So we've got much more joined up thinking, and we should have a better building at the end of this without the problems of conflagration again. So hopefully this will be the answer.
Thank you. And I think now we'll move to the vote. I mean, again, I'll echo what I said earlier. This is really the end of the beginning of the process, and actually the development, the building of it itself, and making sure that goes properly, and then making sure that residents are engaged throughout this process going forward is going to be really important. Councillor Garinga, really quickly, then, and then we'll move to the vote.
Thank you. The point that I was making and Councillor Foster was making, we need to learn from past mistakes. I'm delighted that our building control department will be controlling this, so I will be happy to vote in favour.
Thank you, Councillor. Sharon, are you okay to do a roll call vote, please, on this item? So this is to approve, subject to the amended condition.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So when I call your name, if you could please turn on your camera and your microphone and say if you are voting for, against or abstaining. Councillor Eric Allen.
I'm voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Kevin Burke.
I'm voting for.
Councillor Richard Clare.
For.
Councillor Tim Foster.
I will vote for.
Councillor Vincent Galligan.
Voting for.
Councillor Peter Garinga.
We'll be voting for.
Councillor Amy Haldane. I'm going to come back to Councillor Haldane. Councillor Tony Shields.
I'll be voting for, please.
Councillor Jill Whitehead.
For.
And Councillor Drew Heffernan.
For.
I'm just going to come back and see if Councillor Haldane is able to switch on her microphone.
Sorry, Sharon. Can you hear me now?
Oh, I can hear you now. Thank you.
For.
Thank you. So that's 10 votes for, none against and no abstentions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So thank you. That item has passed and we've disposed of that. We're now moving to item 6 on the agenda, which is 14 Clarks Avenue, again in Worcester Park Ward. And I think, Ian, you're doing a presentation for this one.
Yep, thank you, Chair. The application site is 14 Clarks Avenue. The application is variation of the approved drawings to retain and complete 2 outbuildings that have been erected on site, and provision of a patio and changes in land level. I'd just like to point councillors to a typographical error in the report in paragraph 2.5, which should read that the patio would be 0.26 metres in height. Just going on to the presentation, the application site is 14 Clarks Avenue. It comprises a bungalow and rear garden. It forms a series of 6 similar bungalows on the northeast side of Clarks Avenue. To the east of the site, you have St Raphael's Hospice and St Bede's Convention Centre. And to the north and south of the site and west are residential dwellings, typically either semi-detached or detached dwellings. Just to run through a few photos of the site. So this is a photo showing the rear elevation of the bungalow. The extensions that you see were subject to a lawful development certificate. Just in front here is the smaller outbuilding. I'll refer to it as a smaller outbuilding, which is built on the shared boundary with 16 Clarks Avenue. This is the outbuilding as it was at the site visit. The application has been invited due to an enforcement complaint as the outbuilding wasn't built per the approved plans on site. As you can see, this is where the applicant has stopped the works. Just to give you a view looking towards 16 Clarks Avenue and its rear elevation. Another view towards 12 Clarks Avenue and another neighbouring property. And this is the side access. The design of the bungalows when they were originally laid out had the shared access, well, a single access, but it runs down the side elevation of the adjacent bungalow, and the window here serves a bedroom. And just to give you an indication, this is a view taken from the rear garden of 12 Clarks Avenue. The application, I'll just run through it because the site has been subject to a number of applications on the site. Originally, a lawful development certificate was granted for the 2 rear buildings. The footprint, the depth of the rear larger outbuilding was 3.6 metres deep. With the smaller outbuilding being 3 metres in depth and 1.5 metres in width. Both the outbuildings had flat roofs and were considered permitted development. Going on, an application in 2016 was granted for changes to the outbuildings. There was no proposed change to the smaller outbuilding, which would retain the same footprint. The larger outbuilding would retain the same depth and width. However, the applicant applied for a dual pitched roof, and this would result in an increase in the overall height of 0.8 metres, which at the time officers thought was an acceptable increase in height and wouldn't result in any harm to the character of the area or the neighbour's amenity. Subject to an enforcement complaint, the applicant then applied for another application to vary the original permission. This, after having been on site, this involved changes to the depth of the rearmost outbuilding to 4.6 metres in height. No changes to the smaller outbuilding's footprint. However, there were changes to the roof of the smaller outbuilding, so its height increased to 2.6 metres, which meant that it was no longer permitted development, and also a change in the roof design, having a small little mono-pitched element and a flat roof. The applicant also proposed a hipped roof to the larger outbuilding. This would result in an overall height of 4.6 metres in height. This application was refused for the reasons given in the officer's report. And just to show you a couple more of the elevations and also changes in land levels as well, and the small patio area to the rear. The application before you is again to vary the condition of the original permission. The applicant has gone away and changed the roof design of the rearmost outbuilding, and has also reduced the depth of the outbuilding to 4.3 metres, as is what is built on site. The change in the roof design is such that they have now reduced its height to what was previously approved at 3.3 metres in height. The smaller outbuilding overall height would be 0.26 metres when measured from the natural ground level, and then you have the small patio area to the rear here, and the small changes in land levels. And just to show you the other elevations of the outbuilding. Officers believe that the changes to the roof design in removing the gable end adjacent to both neighbouring properties has reduced the impact on these properties, and the overall height and massing of the roof design has been reduced, so it would appear as a more modest outbuilding than what they had previously applied for and what's refused for. In addition, officers have recommended a condition to ensure that the outbuilding is kept ancillary to the main dwelling house, and with the suggested conditions, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to open the floor to any questions from councillors on the specific aspects of this application. So you can just let me know in the chat box. Councillor Shields.
Hello. Looking at what we've just seen, the plans, and reading through it's almost up to the half of the whole site is due to be taken up by buildings. When do we have the ability to say, well, quite frankly, enough is enough? I mean, we can see this site is developed to death. It looks like there's no back garden left. We're meant to be a garden borough. I'll get an answer to that to start with, please, Chair.
Sure. I think Ian or Andy, do you want to come in and talk just about development in gardens and proportions of what's allowed?
Yeah, I'm happy to, Chair. So under Class C, which of the General Permitted Development Order, which refers to outbuildings, one of the provisos in that is that excluding the original building, no more than 50% of the curtilage of a dwelling house may be covered in outbuildings, containers, or any other development that falls under Class C. So to some extent, that is a material consideration when assessing the application. The actual area that is covered by outbuildings isn't over 50% of the garden area. I haven't got that at hand at this moment, councillors, but it was something that I checked when formulating my recommendation for this approval. However, as you say, it's something that can be considered in the determination of this application.
So, really, if I can, am I still on?
Yeah, sure, councillor.
So I was checking my microphone's on. So really, if it doesn't break the 50% threshold, it's realistically scale, dominance, and outlook of neighbours, and also I haven't got great comfort in the council having a planning condition remaining. It's saying that the building must be ancillary to the main dwelling house, because we don't even have a service that goes out and checks on these things, do we? We don't even have an out-of-hours service if this property starts to get used as a bungalow. And one more question: what is the small extension for the small shed? What is the purpose of that? It seems very unusual.
Sure. Ian, can you answer those?
Yeah, not problem. In terms of the smaller outbuilding, I would imagine that's some sort of store. It doesn't have any windows in it, only has a door to it. However, I haven't inquired that haven't asked that from the applicant, as it is an outbuilding and it should remain ancillary to the main dwelling house. In terms of the rearmost outbuilding, in terms of it being used as anything as a bungalow or as a self-contained unit, as a local authority, we can take enforcement action against the applicant should they convert the rear building into a residential self-contained unit. Obviously, there are elements of fact and degree in that, but it would be something that council would be able to take enforcement action against.
There's also, sorry, Chair.
Just one before you ask the next question, Councillor. The applicant did actually speak today, so you can ask him about the smaller building later. But if you want to ask your next question.
Well, there's also the shared access, which is a great concern. If the shared outside main outside large building becomes, something that's used for social gatherings, etc., it's reasonable to expect the side alley to become dominated by guests going back and forth right past the next door neighbour's bedroom window, if I heard it and saw it correctly. So there's the antisocial capacity of this building to consider.
Chair, can I come in? It's Andy Webber, Head of Planning. Just Councillor Shields, in response to your question, I think these outbuildings, and those of you who sat on planning committee long enough or on member development would have heard me mention this before. I think they do present us with a bit of a dilemma. Class E does allow quite large buildings to be built without plan permission in the backs of people's gardens. Yet, on the other hand, there is national planning policy, which has been translated into our local plan, which, as you rightly say, we try to protect back gardens. So there's a bit of a paradox there that we're trying to grapple with. The report does mention there's a fallback position in terms of the larger outbuilding being not that much greater than something you could build under permitted development. So it is a concern, Councillor Shields. And for what it's worth, personally, I think that the Class C rights probably do extend too much latitude in terms of homeowners being able to build these large outbuildings in their back gardens. And I know, Councillor Shields, we've had issues with these outbuildings in your ward as well. So that is a difficulty I think that we deal with since the move to these larger tolerances for these outbuildings. I think it does make it very difficult to resist then planning applications, and this is a planning application for something which is a little over what you can build under permitted development. I'm sure Ian will comment a bit more about the shared access. It's a very unusual situation where the access between two properties gives rise to what is, at the end of the day, a mutual position of overlooking between those two neighbours. That is something which is historic, and I think what we're saying is we don't think that this application this evening is going to exacerbate that to the extent that it would warrant a refusal of plan permission.
Okay.
Ian, did you want to come in on that before I bring in Councillor Gallagher for his question?
I mean, it was something which I found odd when I went out on site, and I've obviously spoken to both the applicant and the neighbours in respect to this application, going on site and having a look at it. To add further to what Andy said, I mean, obviously we understand the concerns of Councillor Shields in terms of it being used for, social gatherings and whatnot. However, had the applicant built the outbuilding under permitted development rights, he would still be able to use the outbuilding for those sort of social interactions. So, I mean, from the sort of officer's point of view, it's something very difficult to control when the sort of access is historic such as that. The best we can do is obviously have the condition on there to prevent it from sort of becoming a self-contained unit, but its use for anything sort of incidental or ancillary to the main dwelling house would be very difficult to control.
Thank you. Councillor Gallagher, do you want to ask your question, and then I'll bring Councillor afterwards?
Thank you. Ian, looking at the photograph, I'm actually looking at the building, the breeze block building that's out there. Yeah, am I right in saying that on one side, the breeze block is right up against the fence? It is. In fact, it's up against the fence both sides.
It's the full width of the plot, essentially.
So how's maintenance going to be carried out at all on the neighbours' fences when they want to? And are they going to be faced with breeze block that's not been rendered or finished? Not very nice.
No, I mean, obviously, in terms of the finishes and what have you, we have a condition there that it should be finished in what was proposed in the application form. In terms of maintenance of the fences, typically you'll find that probably one, either the applicant or the neighbour is responsible for one of the fences. By looks of things, I would suggest with the panels, the way the panels are arranged, the applicant would be responsible for the fence on the right, and number 16 would be responsible for the fence on the left. But they would need to check their title deeds to find out whose responsibility it is. In terms of how they finish it, I mean, this is something that the applicant would need to speak to his neighbours for maintenance and what have you, if they need to remove the fences, and it would be a sort of civil issue. It's not something that we would necessarily consider as part of the planning application itself.
I kind of think that the people whose fence you would have to take down to finish off the side, which, as you say, is probably only one side, are going to love that if we allow that to go through. I mean, why wasn't it built with, you know, a suitable gaps for maintenance? There you go. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I mean, Ian, did you want to come back just on that last one? Presumably that would also be allowing to make development again to get that close to the fence.
I mean, you've hit the nail on the head, Chair. In terms of proximity to the boundary, the criterion class C only specify that if it's built within the curtilage, so it could be right up to the shared boundary. The height of the outbuilding can only be 2.5 metres in height, so the applicant would be within their rights to go the full width of the plot under permitted development rights. And obviously that was what was previously approved both under the LDC and the previous planning permission.
I mean, I don't know if you can just try and describe, so visually, how high could it, so we've got it in front of us now, where would it go up to if it was permitted development? Would it still go above the fence, or would it be below the fence?
Yeah, okay, so what you're looking at as built is 4.3 metres in depth, and the height of the top breeze blocks are 2.6 metres, and that was what was measured on site by the enforcement officer who went to investigate. So obviously they would need to do some work in respect to the steel and some of those breeze blocks and take them down. So that would be you would be losing 10 centimetres in height, so the eaves would be 10 centimetres lower, and then obviously the height of the roof would then be another 0.8 metres, but obviously you'd have the hipped roof slopes and the sort of crowned roof on top there as well. So what you're looking at the moment is 2.6 metres in height when you measure those walls at the moment.
Okay, I'll bring Councillor Whitehead, but just on this point, Councillor Shields has asked one specific question, and whether the eaves would overhang the boundary as it's built at the moment. Ian, I think you're muted if you are talking at the moment.
Sorry, Chair. On the plans, as you can see, the roof is shown up to the boundary of the site. So the dotted line denotes the shared boundary, and obviously they would have to keep the eaves within that shared boundary.
Okay, thank you. Cool. Councillor Whitehead, sorry for the delay. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes, if the developer, the householders, already tried to build up over what is permitted development, is there a danger that there could be further attempts to build on the outbuildings in future? We have had other applications that have come before this committee with outbuildings where they've been added to after the initial application. There is also, I note, an allegation, I think it might be in one of the statements, that the house itself might have been used without permission as a house of multiple occupancy. Can things like this be checked in the future to make sure that any outbuilding is not used for this purpose? Because it's already been pointed out that we lack the enforcement capacity. This does seem to be on the increase, and bearing in mind that our local plan is discouraging back garden land development, this does seem to be on the increase. I don't know how we can rein it back, because this doesn't seem to be the only example where this has happened or may even happen in the future.
Yeah, so in respect to the house being used as a or the property being used as a house of multiple occupation, I've checked the planning history, and there's no planning permission for the use of the HMO for up to 7 people as per the written statement, and for more than 6 people you need to apply for planning permission for that HMO. Having said that, HMOs for 6 or less people, there is a permitted change from C3, which is your normal dwelling house, to C4, which is a HMO of up to 6 people. I have contacted Environmental Health and Licensing, and they have no record of the property ever being licensed as an HMO. So as far as officers are concerned, that's never been the use. In terms of the outbuilding being added to, I mean, in terms of this recommendation, it's one where I think that I personally think, in my professional opinion, that the applicant has basically applied for all they can possibly get. However, having said that, they are within their rights to apply for a further planning permission should they wish to, and whether or not that would be acceptable, we would have to have a look at that and decide it on its own merits. However, as I said previously, in respect to permitted development rights, homeowners and owners of houses can develop up to 50% of their land. And unfortunately, those permitted development rights do form a material consideration. Now, having said that, each garden and each application will have its own unique characteristics. So whenever we have planning applications in for these outbuildings, we do look at them and look at the plot sizes, the relationship to other properties and what have you, in formulating our recommendations. And there are instances where we do believe that the outbuildings are too large for the site. And I'm not sure, but if you remember, 11 Glenthorne Gardens was an example where we successfully defended an appeal for an outbuilding which was too large for the site. However, in this instance, with what's previously been approved and sort of the moderate increases in height, we believe that this this outbuilding isn't so large that it would necessarily warrant refusal, and we believe the applicant has come back with a sort of design solution that addresses the previous reasons for refusal.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Gallagher, do you want to ask your question? I think we'll move to the registered speakers.
Thank you. Coming back to really what Councillor Shields said, I'm trying to look at the plans, and from what I could see is that it will need an eaves that will, by its very nature, not sit inside the wall. It will sit just touching over the wall, and there'll be a gutter. So can you build something right up against somebody's property and then put a gutter over their property?
No, I mean, if guttering and what have you shouldn't overhang the shared boundary, but when you actually look at the plans, they haven't shown any guttering on the roof of the outbuilding, and so therefore, we take that in consideration as what's submitted before us in terms of the plans themselves.
So where is the water going to go? Into the people, just run off into the people's garden? Or is there going to be a gutter hanging over their their site, and where is it going to go to then? So it's going to be a downpipe? Just where?
I mean, unfortunately, I haven't got an answer for that question, Councillor Gallagher. As far as, like I say, I mean, in terms of the drawings themselves, the outbuilding itself doesn't show any guttering, which would overhang the shared boundaries. Obviously,
you say that the dotted line is the boundary.
Yes, that's correct.
Well, we can see that the drawing shows it right up to the dotted line. So anything that's done would be overhanging into other people's gardens, is from what I can see. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Garinga, I see you've got a question. Is it best addressed to officers, or do you think it better addressed to one of the speakers we've got tonight?
Addressed to officers, actually, Chairman. The last point was a good one. Okay, there's a rainstorm, right? And it pours with rain, so virtually with no gap between the fence and the roof, water is going to go into the neighbours' gardens. Because there's virtually no room for the water to go. I mean, talking about drains and guttering, but in a rainstorm, water will come off the roof and go into neighbouring gardens. That's not fair on the neighbours, is it?
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Andy, sorry, did you want to? Can I see your things going?
Yeah. I mean, just really to, and I see Mr. Whiteman has indicated he's going to respond also. Looking at these two plans here, and it's quite evident from the photographs, there is a set-in, modest that it might be, from the boundary, and as Ian says, it's the intention of this build when it's complete that everything resides within the curtilage of the application site. So there will have to be a specific design to take account of that when it's finished. We wouldn't normally expect to see the guttering detail shown on a planning drawing, and I'm not sure that guttering overhanging a boundary would be a planning matter on which this committee could refuse planning permission. But I see the applicant has indicated in the chat function, Chair, that he wishes to address that point in questions as well.
Thank you. And we will come to Mr. Whiteman later, but before we do that, we've got Mr. Lobo, who's joined us this evening. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. If you want to just unmute so we can check that we can hear you properly.
Hi, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, no, we've got you. Thank you. Sorry, do you want to speak again? You've disappeared from my. Oh, there you are. That's
sorry,
right.
I pressed the wrong button and the camera went off.
Don't worry. What's going to happen now is you're going to have 4 minutes to address the committee, and then if it's okay, some councillors may have some questions for you. Is that all right?
I'm very happy to take questions. This is something that is of significant impact to my parents as well as our family. So happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you. So the 4 minutes will start whenever you start speaking, and then I'll let you know when you've reached your limit.
Okay, all right. I'll start now. So let me start by thanking the committee for giving me an opportunity to raise our objection to this application. It has been a most distressing time for my parents as well as our family. You've got the photos that have been shown. Can I ask you to look at those photos and reflect what this is doing to the neighbours, particularly my parents who live at 12 Clarks Avenue? My parents have lived there for almost 45 years now. Since the house was sold to the applicants in 2011, their life has been hell, with a never-ending stream of start-stop building work and non-stop planning applications being submitted. Every single application is pushing the boundary. You've already mentioned at what point does this stop? We are pleading for you to stop this. The building dominates the surrounding area. The photos taken, and you can see them, show just how large this building is. It blocks out a conference centre that is behind it. It dominates every single view from every single house, and I provided pictures to evidence this. Furthermore, the building is out of place. There is nothing in the surrounding area that is equal to the size and scale of this proposed building. The construction robs my parents of their garden. The pictures that you're showing, that's the back garden that my parents have. That is, you know, I can't emphasize how much that is robbing them of their life. The point that was raised earlier regarding the HMO and also the side passageway, you can see how unique the construction of the property is. There is a significant invasion of privacy, as often there are small children in that room. This is my parents' house and the grandchildren stay there. So at what point do people come in and out with this proposed ancillary use? The owner has already treated his house as an HMO, and I don't think he got permission, which is what Ian referred to earlier. There were 7 adults living in there for 2 to 3 months who only left that property when a Freedom of Information request was put in. The proposed application recommends that the approval is done with the elements of having ancillary to the main house. Again, this will be used as living accommodation. There's a shower toilet in there, and if someone sticks an electric cooker in there, you've got living accommodation. And you've already pointed out it's difficult for you to police this. These are small chalet-style houses built for couples or families, not for 6 people that you mentioned earlier. Could be one class, and also we've already had 7 people living in there. The recommendation also says, and this is the recommendation to approve, that the proposal would not harm the character or appearance of the surrounding area. Look at it. It is disgusting. It dominates every single thing that is done. It's also noted that the proposed changes would not harm the amenity of the neighbouring occupiers. This is blatantly untrue. My parents are one of those occupiers. We have been appealing and challenging every single one of these applications. Permitted development isn't a problem. Within 0.5.8 of the report that goes here, you talk about the sizes. That is acceptable. This is unacceptable. So in closing, my parents are living through hell. They are at the latter stages of their lives and are unable to have a peaceful retirement. The permitted development is robbing my parents of natural light, which is the eaves construction in the main house, and this building further invades on their privacy. If you note from the report, it's only 15 metres from the edge of their building, and I repeat, only 15 metres, and this is a large concrete construction. The security risk that comes with the loss of privacy, as people will be using that side passageway, you are going past a bedroom window. So you're basically insisting curtains are drawn at all times because you do not know when someone's going to go walking back and throw through that.
Thank you, Mr. Labour. That's the 4 minutes, but thank you very much for that. What I'm going to do is open to questions now, if that's all right. But before I do that, we normally have a response from officers first, just to clarify or bring up anything that may have been raised during the presentation.
Chair, if I can come in, just really to I think it's important to emphasise the fact that we have every sympathy with Mr. Lobo's situation and his parents, and we don't wish to make life more difficult for them. Well, I just wanted to make one simple observation, that's all. In the photograph on your screens at the moment, the structure is described in terms that the speaker has just mentioned. But all I would say in comments to that, in response, is that, of course, this is an unfinished structure and it's not going to look like that. It will look like it will look on the drawings. The reason it looks like that is by the prompt attention of our planning enforcement team, who came down on site to stop the development going up and not in accordance with the approved drawings. So that was the only observation I wish to make, Chair.
Sorry, okay, thank you. Chair, am I able to respond to Ian?
So that was Mr. Webber. What I'll bring in a councillor, and you can probably cover that your response in one of your answers as well. Is that okay?
Of course.
So do we have any councillors who want to raise any questions? Councillor Shields.
Probably what you'd expect me to say. I'd ask the gentleman to tell me what he was going to ask Andy Webber.
Oh, okay.
I would. Oh, sorry.
I would.
No, Mr. Lobo, please.
Hello. What were you going to ask Andy Webber? You wanted to say something. What was it?
Very simply, I was going to ask him, under the permitted development rules, which part is, can you just stop? Because that is 15 metres from the edge of the building. Now, bear in mind, this is the corner plot angle, so that's more than 20 metres, probably. So 15 metres of a large construction that I appreciate it's going to be rendered, but that dominates the garden.
Can I come back on that? And I don't want this to become a two-way discussion between myself and the objector, and that's not really the purpose of the meeting. But I think Ian did explain, and it's in the report. And I go back to the point I made to Councillor Shields about the fact that these are very considerable tolerances which are given to allow people to build very large structures in their gardens. The difficulty here, I think, Mr. Lobo, is the fact that they are short rear gardens, and hence the views are much more kind of foreshortened, and therefore the impact in terms of the outlook is going to be greater. But because of the rules about how much of the curtilage, and the curtilage means the whole of the red line site in the deeds of the house, minus the original dwelling, because those rights allow for quite a considerable addition of built form on top of the original dwelling house, that's what allows these types of buildings to come forward as permitted development. But I must emphasise to committee this evening, to Mr. Lobo, this is not an application under permitted development. This is an application for planning permission to alter something, and committee do have the gift tonight to make that decision and come to their own conclusions in terms of whether or not this is an appropriate form of development. And obviously we will come on to that into debate. So although the permitted development situation is very relevant context, and as Ian said, there is a genuine fallback position, and we have to think about that. Just to remind members, this is a planning application. You have to consider it on its planning merits based on the final version as shown in the drawings of what is proposed. So there'll be some remedial work to the structure, which you see in the photographs, which I accept doesn't look great in its unfinished form, but it's not complete yet.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any particular questions from that councillors have raised for you yet, Ms. Lobo. So I think that we might ask you, if that's okay, to log off. If you just give me a few seconds to see if anyone else wants to speak. And then if I ask you to log off the call, you can follow us on YouTube. And we'll move to the other speakers. But thank you very much for your time tonight. I think it's been really important to hear the personal story and how and the effects of this development on neighbours. So thank you for your time, and like I said, we'll be making a decision a bit later tonight.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, we now move to the next speaker, which is Councillor Drummond. So Councillor Drummond is the ward councillor for this area, along with me, and de-delegate this application. Councillor Drummond, good evening.
Good evening.
How are you? You okay?
Thank you very much. Yeah, not too bad, thank you.
So same process as before. Mr. Lobo went for 4 minutes and 15 seconds. So you've got an extra 15 seconds should you wish to take it. And then we'll have questions again like we did with Mr. Lobo. But we'll start the time whenever you want to begin.
I'm confident that I'll be quicker, so I shall start. So first of all, thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to speak. So I think there were some technical difficulties in registering my name, so I appreciate you giving me this opportunity. And thank you to Sharon for sorting it out so quickly. 14 Clarks Avenue is part of a small parade of chalet-style bungalows which were built in the 1930s, interestingly as holiday homes. And it's clear when you walk around them that was the case. Over time, of course, they've turned into permanent residencies, and the bungalows on Clarks are two-bedroom properties with back gardens that would typically house a single person, a couple, or a small family. I first visited this site last year before the previous application was withdrawn. I have to say I was taken aback by the scale of the current development. Looking either side, it's easy to get a clear view of Clarks, which is a relatively straight road. Most gardens are well presented with small to medium-sized sheds. There is one larger building that I can see, or I could see, and it's what I would describe as a good-sized outbuilding. I think it's used as a games room. If I'm to be frank, it's more of a very large garden shed, and it entirely fits in the area, unlike the current development, which we're now discussing. So we are where we are. So when I first saw this application, I wasn't particularly concerned. After all, it's only another 3.5 square meters we're talking about. This is ultimately as a result of the depth being changed and the width being slightly decreased. So you're probably wondering why I asked for this application to be de-delegated. As I first said, on the face of it, not a large change, and one which could easily be dismissed. But then, after giving some thought, I began to consider the layout of the building, and this is where what one could consider an inconsequential increase becomes, in my mind, something far, far more significant. So I've already said, you'll note the depth of the development in this application increases further, resulting in a loss of about another 0.5 metre of garden green space. To be clear, this development is creeping ever closer to the main residence. You heard me earlier describe the other gardens along Clarks Avenue, so increasing the development further, I believe, is entirely inconsistent with the other surrounding gardens along Clarks. It already stands out like a sore thumb in what is a nice, quiet neighbourhood, and this further creep makes what is already a bad situation even worse. I've said numerous times the overall increase may not sound a lot when presented to the committee, but as we've heard from the family next door, the reality is far, far more damaging. They are finding themselves closed in by this building already, and this has caused them to not want to use their garden space, which of course is inconsistent with our Sutton local plan. So I please urge you to ask yourselves if, as a council, we want to compound an already dire situation for the families of Clarks by approving the alteration on this building so it's even bigger and overbearing to the gardens next door. Before I summarise, I'd like to highlight to the committee and be clear that the issue does not just impact on the houses on either side. Currently, this building can be seen from houses further down the avenue. I was in a back garden a few weeks ago, a little way down Clarks, and I had a clear vision of the development. My thoughts were, if approved, it's a further garden snatch. It will become even more visible. So please take this into account. It's not just about the gardens on either side, but also the properties further up Clarks, and how the outlook is going to have an adverse overbearing effect on these surrounding gardens. So I would summarise by asking this committee to say enough is enough and to stop this development creep, protect the surrounding area of Clarks Avenue, and allow the residents to enjoy the gardens as much as they can. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor. And can I also just say thank you for coming to speak? Because sometimes we have, it's not compulsory that people who de-delegate applications to come and speak, but I think we do sometimes have cases where they're de-delegated and the councillor doesn't come. So I'd like to thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks. So can I just move, first of all, just to Andy for any thing he wants to add or clarify from Councillor Drummond's statement, and then we'll move to questions.
No, not at all, Chair.
Great, thank you. So do we have any Councillor Shields?
Hello. We're on. We're live. It's like running my own little studio here. It's what I heard Councillor Drummond. What I heard him say was, between the lines, is how do we really put up with an ever creeping development that will grow? It seems to be organic, growing and growing. The dominance is available, although it's in a back garden setting, available to sort of ruin the vista of other properties quite a distance in each direction. What he's really asking is, I think he's right in saying, can you steer him to the right ways of the planning department, in planning terms, how we could in many ways neuter this development, whether it be through rendered fit, the stipulation, the type of finish, height, bulk, usage, whether we make it a licensable usage. I think that's really what Tom was talking about, is that in part it's built, reducing it by 6 inches isn't going to make much difference, but the usage and the actual visual dominance, and therefore the the disadvantage that close residents have with this thing being built in their garden. How do we reconcile that?
Okay, thank you. What I'm going to do, I might ask Andy to come in a second to answer some of the points you made. I think are probably better for debate. But Councillor Drummond, sorry, if you've got anything you want to add to what Councillor Shields has said or respond to anything he said.
No, I think. Thank you. No, I think Councillor Shields has read between the lines quite well there. If I can say so, as I said right at the beginning of my statement, we are where we are. It's now ensuring that we don't make a bad situation worse and making the best of that situation.
Well, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Garinga, you got a question for Councillor Drummond?
Yes, please. What worries me, and maybe it worries you, is that if this was granted tonight, the applicant will then go for something a little bit bigger next time, and then the time after that, and then the time after that. So does that concern you, and does it also concern you that the applicant appears to have used his property as an HMO? How can we prevent this building being used for people staying the night, sleeping, using it as a bungalow or whatever? Do you believe if it was going to be granted tonight, there should be conditions to ensure that it's never used for anybody to stay or live in there?
I let Councillor Drummond reply, but I think that condition is already in what we're considering tonight. So I'm sure Councillor Drummond would agree with what you've said, but I think that is covered by the condition. But Councillor Drummond, have you got anything in particular to respond?
Absolutely, Chair. Yes, you've hit the nail on the head. Yes, Councillor Garinga, there is concerns about that. There is this condition put on it. I've seen or recommended to be put on it. I would hope that condition is enforced if wasn't to go that way. But you're also right. I have concerns about what's going to happen next. If you approve this, do we go for another half a metre, and then another half a metre, and then another half a metre? I have concerns about that. So yes, I ask the Chair to suggest I agree with everything you said.
Thank you. Andy, did you want to? I can't see any other questions. I'll give a few more seconds. But Andy, do you want to come back on anything that's been said?
Not so much to come back, but just really, I think to summarise what Councillor Shields and Councillor Drummond I think are saying, because I wouldn't want to misquote either. I think what councillors are saying and Councillor Drummond has articulated is the concern is here. It's the depth of the outbuilding, which is kind of coming back towards the main dwelling house and therefore becoming closer in view from the neighbours. That is the concern, because overall the maximum height of the larger rear building shown in the photograph here is not to be any greater than that which was previously granted. So as far as I understand it, the concern is that the footprint is kind of, to use the phrase that's been used a couple of times already this evening, is creeping up the garden a little bit, and I think that's really appears to be the main concern so far. And I hope Councillor Shields and Councillor Drummond I've given an accurate summary of where I think you're coming from on that.
Yes,
yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think we've got any more questions, Councillor. So thank you very much for coming tonight. If you'd like to log off from the call now, you can follow us on YouTube.
Indeed. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Okay, thank you. So we've had the objector and the councillor. We've also tonight had the applicant registered to speak. That is Miss. Oh, sorry, my speakers list has gone.
Mr. Whiteman was on the call, Chair.
Mr. Whiteman. Good evening, Mr. Whiteman. How are you? Test your speaker so we can make sure we can hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we've got you. Thank you. It's a bit like what's happened with the other two speakers. You've got up until 4 minutes and 15 seconds to address the committee, and then we'll have some questions possibly for you afterwards, if that's okay. And the timer will start when you begin to speak.
Okay, just to be clear, I'm the agent, not the applicant. Yeah. So as previously previously discussed, the site has already got planning approval for a similar development. I think the actual application that we're proposing here is an increase of around 0.7 metres. So just as a perspective, that's like the depth of a kitchen worktop. The application that's already been approved has flank walls on either side, which go up to a height of 3.3 metres, which, as you can see, the current proposed change looks to change that to a hipped roof. So I believe that the change that we're proposing here, although the depth has increased, the actual impact on the neighbour will be lessened by this change. So if this application is refused, the applicant will be forced to go back to the originally approved drawings, which will require them to build a flank wall on that side of a height of 3.3 metres. So I think the change, that the reason for this revised application is in response to obviously the structure itself being built larger than what was originally approved, and that was a genuine kind of error from the builder, who misunderstood the requirements in that he built to a square metre allowance, which is under building control restrictions, and not really understanding that there was a requirement to meet the size that was approved in planning terms. And the structure as itself has actually been reduced since the enforcement team have come to site, so that the height that's currently on site is within permitted development, and so is the footprint itself. So the structure itself at the moment on site is within permitted development. So if a flat roof was put on it, then no further action would be needed. But that's the reason why the applicant would like a pitched roof is for personal reasons. For the use of the building is going to be an artist studio for his son, which for personal reasons he would like to be a pitched roof, which he did actually speak to Councillor Drummond today just to explain a bit more about the personal reasons why he's looking to do this, and did just communicate that with him. And the points that have been raised about the gradual increases in sizes, this has just been one change in size that we've applied for, and that's as a result of the mistake that's been made on site. So it's not a sequential applications that we keep asking for more. It's just a response to the mistake that was made on site. That the applicant stopped works as soon as the issue was raised, and has made an attempt to rectify that issue with the applications that have been made. And the latest application, I believe today, is going to minimise what the impact could be to the neighbour. As I said, I just want to be clear that, and I'm sure Ian will be able to flip back to the originally approved drawings that could be built. That shows a flank wall that goes up to a height of 3.3 metres. That, I believe, what we're essentially proposing to do in this application is to pitch that roof on the side to remove that flanking wall. And the points about the gutter overhanging, the intent, because obviously we're responding to what's already been built on site. So obviously, ideally, we would have been slightly inset from the boundaries, but it is completely possible to do secret gutters that were within the plane of the roof, so that the gutter itself is actually within the plane of the roof, captures the waters and then brings it round to the front to the downpipes. So that's not an issue, and there certainly wouldn't be any overhanging beyond any kind of boundaries or anything like that. And I think that's all I probably have to say at this point. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. White. If it's okay, we'll probably have a few questions from councillors. Councillors, if you want to indicate on the chat function, and I'll bring you in, unless Mr. Webber has got anything to just summarise or add.
No, not at all. But I think the point about the hidden guttering is well made, Chair, and I think members should just have regard to that in questions and debate.
Thank you. Do we have anyone with any questions, either Councillor Shields or Councillor Garinga, who raised questions at the last speaker? Councillor Shields.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I was having a little bit of technical sausage finger issue. You press 6 keys at once, nothing happens. I've decided. What is the actual purpose of the small shed on site, Mr. Whiteman?
That's a boiler shed, so it's housing a megaflow and a boiler.
to feed the shed?
The main house, definitely, yeah.
Right. So, what services do you envisage being connected to the large shed?
I'm not entirely sure, but there may be used for a toilet because, as I said, it's going to be used as a kind of day artist studio for his son. So he obviously be easier if he could use the toilet within the outbuilding during the day rather than having to keep going back into the house. But I don't believe that's confirmed if they actually, because obviously the extra cost of putting in a toilet might not be something that they want to do. So yeah.
Yeah. It won't be very far to go to use the toilet, will it? Because the garden's only about 30 foot long by the look of it. And I'm very interested in how you use your analogy that it's only going to be as bigger by a kitchen worktop. Are you fitting a kitchen in this development?
Okay, maybe a poor choice of comparison, but the depth of a kitchen worktop is roughly about 650 millimeters. The proposed increase in depth is 700 millimeters. So just to give someone perspective on what that depth would look like, not a comparison to what might be added in.
Okay. And what is the internal layout likely to be?
It's just open plan, so you can see that there's roof lights proposed to bring more natural light in it. So it's just an open plan space essentially. And again, the reason for the vaulting of the ceiling is just to make it feel too enclosed and to add more light into the space essentially.
Not to feel too enclosed by a building that by its own nature encloses the rear gardens and dominates others. That's an interesting perspective. It seems to only work.
Well, I would say it's kind of subjective. When you go to the photo from the garden, I think it's not beyond what many people do now in their gardens. I'm sure with working from home becoming more commonplace, it's going to be a more commonplace to have some form of outbuilding in the garden. I don't believe it's probably approximately about half a metre higher than the fence. So I'm not sure, and that there's tree lines on the back and on the other side of the neighbours. So I'm not too sure. I think that's a subjective view in some sense that it's overbearing. I think, as I said, what's previously approved is a flanking wall that's going to, in my view, would be worse than having a pitched roof on that side. So I think I think the compromise, the change that's been made, I wouldn't say it's a compromise. It's actually, I think it's going to suit both the applicant and the neighbours in terms of what could be there if the application is refused, I think.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. White, I'm going to bring it to the council in a second, but you said when you were speaking that as it currently stands, the building is down to permitted development height. Is this photo taken before that's been done or after it's been done?
I'm not too sure, because I was trying to count the blocks. I don't know if you can go back to the picture that shows the actual full height, because I can probably tell if I quickly count the blocks what that height is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that looks like it's 2.5 meters, I believe, because it's 10 blocks, and then there's one below, or half of one below. So that should be about 2.5 meters. A block is 225.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Foster, did you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. I saw from with the paperwork that the applicant doesn't live on site. Who lives here?
I couldn't say for certain, because I don't know the personal use of the building itself, but I know that the applicant is living further away whilst this development was being built. Their plan is to move into this property, but obviously because of the nature of what's happened, they haven't been able to move into it until the works have finished. So and that's where the miscommunication as well happened with the builder, because the applicant lived quite far from the site itself. So the actual use, I'm not too sure. I know that the builders have been storing, the applicants allowed the builders to use some of the site as a storage just whilst they're working elsewhere. So I think that might be where some of the indication that it's being used as a HMO, but I couldn't say. And I think I would prefer not to comment, because I think it should be down to the accusation has been made. I think the applicant itself should have the opportunity to obviously come back to that, because it might not be true. It might just be a misunderstanding. I couldn't comment for sure.
But we can be certain that this very large building is going to be used as an artist studio by the applicant's son.
Yes, and I can. The applicant can. It's a personal. It's something I would prefer not to kind of talk about on the forum, because it's a personal matter with the son and the applicant. So and he has spoken to Councillor Drummond, who the applicant is able to provide kind of proof of the use and the reason for the use, which can be has been spoken about with Councillor Drummond earlier today, actually. And if it was necessary, it has been actually made to Mr. Ian Williams as well. So it's not something that it's a personal matter that I wouldn't be in a position to share.
And this property is going to have full drainage, is it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Water supply and drainage. Where is that going in?
Oh, sorry, for the outbuilding, for
for the outbuilding, yeah.
So you have drainage for the rainwater, but for drainage, no drainage has been put in, I believe, for foul water at the moment, because obviously the works, you can see there's no floor or anything like that within the building itself. Yeah.
But there needs to be water if it's an artist studio, does it not?
Yeah, but it's very much still at early stages, so there's no services have been, no electrics or anything like that have been taken down to the outbuilding. Yeah.
So, okay, no other questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, my voice is going. Do we have any other councillors who wish to ask a question on this? No? Okay. Mr. Whiteman, thank you for your time tonight. If it's okay for you to log off from the call now, you can follow us and follow the decision on YouTube if you wish to. But for now, I just want to say thank you very much for your time tonight and for coming to speak to us.
Thank you.
Okay. So we've now heard from the three speakers tonight: the objector, the agent, and Councillor Drummond. I propose now that we move to debate, because that's the next what we're going to do anyway. Is there anyone that wishes to start the debate off? Okay, so Councillor Whitehead was in there first. Councillor Whitehead, do you want to get us going?
Yes, I have to say I was rather concerned with the comments made by the last speaker, that with everyone working from home now, that using outbuildings such as this will become the norm, bearing in mind that in our local plan, we don't like building in back garden land. I think this is somewhat of a spurious argument by saying that this development will become the norm when it's an individual to this particular planning application. So I do have concerns. I understand that they want to go back to the original planning application, but it does seem ridiculous, the sheer bulk of this upsetting the local residents and overlooking so much and taking up so much of the garden. So I do have concerns about this.
Thank you, Councillor. I mean, we've heard obviously tonight that quite a lot of people can spend 50% of their curtilage building houses. So, and if the last speaker was correct that this might become more common, we may see more of these applications in front of us, or not if they're done in the permit development. But I'll just leave it there. Councillor Foster, you want to come in?
Sorry. Making sure you can hear me. My concern here is if you go down Clark's Avenue and look at the front of the house, the scale of the development of the dormer is massive and out of proportion. This is out of proportion, and I think that the rationale that was given by the inspector in the when they refused the extension of the dormer extension, in terms of its disturbance of the locals and its domination is relevant to this development. And I find it a little bit perverse that we're here because the applicant had, whether it was a genuine mistake by a builder, but had stepped across the line and we're here for enforcement. And then the threat, if you like, from the last speaker that, okay, we'll go back and we'll build it higher than we could have done before under permitted development. I find the thing is not very neighbourly. Maybe that's not a planning issue, but this is too big for the area, too big for the garden, and a disturbance to everybody apart from the conference centre behind. And for myself, I will vote against it.
Thank you, Councillor. Moving down the list, we've got Councillor Shields.
Thank you, Chairman. I won't be long. Page 53, 1.13, paragraph number 2. And I'll read it out for the benefit of the tape because I think it absolutely, that was the reasons for the refusal of the last planning commission. The proposed development by reason of the excessive height, width, depth and rear of the most rear outbuilding in close proximity, this is the bit, in close proximity to the shared boundaries of the site will result in an overbearing and dominant form of development. While we're looking at it, we can see it in its skeleton form. And coupled with the siting and proximity with smaller outbuildings with 16 Clarks Avenue, and produce an unacceptable sense of enclosure. I think the overbearing and the proximity and the shared boundaries, on just that paragraph alone, I would like to base a case for proposing a refusal of this application built around the quite cogent and well thought out deliberations in under little 2.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll probably come back to that a bit later on if that's okay. I've got a few more speakers. Councillor Garinga.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, everything about it. When you go down the road and you spark up and you look at it and you think, how on earth did he manage to build that extension, loft extension? Unbelievable. Then when you sort of look through and you see it slammed up either the full width of the garden and the size of it, I just feel that it probably wasn't a mistake, and I just feel that its usage could be a little bit in question as to what it could get used for in the end. So, no, I don't like it. I'll be voting against it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Garinga.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm totally opposed to this ever-creeping, ever-enlarging development. I'm very sympathetic to the neighbours' serious worries and loss of amenity. And I just cannot see Bristol allowing this if the applicant ever went to appeal. So I'm definitely going to vote against this. It's out of character. It's too big. It should be thrown out, this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I mean, going to your point about Bristol, I don't know whether the applicant would necessarily appeal this decision or stick with his original one, but I think that's obviously one of those outcomes might be what happens after this meeting, no matter what we decide, but I'm sure that's something we could consider. Councillor Beck.
Yeah, I don't like it, but I don't really agree that we got great grounds to refuse it. I think the officer's report is quite clear that we haven't. I'm debating whether I vote for it or abstain, but I don't think we've got grounds to refuse it. So I just think it's very difficult.
Thank you, Councillor. I think I'm edging towards abstaining, if I'm perfectly honest. I think the question I've got in my head is this new drawing better than what already has permission or not? And that's something that I don't really know what side of the argument I fall down on that one. And that's probably going to be what helps me decide what to do. Councillor Shields.
I just turn it back on and off. I think yes and no. There's not often I say things like that, but yes and no. But we've heard from the neighbour. We heard from Councillor Drummond. The neighbour is quite, an intelligent chap that realises that what's been approved can be built anyway. So that's basically the two halves of the coin that we're talking about tonight. The affected neighbour says refuse this latest and even bigger application, and he knows that the fact that the applicant can carry on with what's prior approved. So I think if it's a turn of balance, the persons that are going to be, without a doubt, affected the most are saying, please, if the worst case scenario, go on and build what you have got permission for, rather than the ever continued creep. So that's I would, the sword of Damocles, I know, but I think I would err towards the recommendation or the request of the neighbour and Councillor Drummond. You're muted if you haven't.
Yeah, no, sorry. I was miming. I wasn't really talking. No, we've got two more people to speak, and then I think we'll move to a vote. We've got to take the recommendations as it stands first and see what happens there. But then I think I can probably know where it's going afterwards. Councillor Clare.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say I'm sympathetic to the developers and the applicants here. I think I agree with what seems to be the emerging consensus that this does look like a case of overdevelopment. I defer to Councillor Burke, who I think knows a lot more about planning matters than I do, but it seems to me there is a case that this would be undue intensification, and I would support a motion to refuse planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Haldane.
Thank you, Chair. Broadly, I agree with everything that's been said. I think it was Councillor Foster who described it as unneighbourly, the development that's taken place so far in the various applications and what's been gone on, which is a great shame. Unfortunately, I don't think there's anything in the planning process that can help that. Or assist the neighbours to come to some kind of compromise or agreement. It's just not the way that planning works, unfortunately. I can't see the applicant abandoning any kind of development in the garden, and I assume something will be built, but I'm not convinced by the assurances of the agent that the building is for the use that he states. I'm just not convinced. I'm not saying anything other than I'm not convinced. It does look awful. I appreciate it's not finished yet, but I appreciate that it's a very short back garden, and the neighbours want to enjoy what they have, and they're unable to do so, and therefore I agree with Tony's point that we should do as they ask and refuse the application.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to come in who you haven't heard from yet? Maybe either Councillor Allen. We heard from Councillor Garinga. We have, yeah. If not, then I think we should move to Councillor Allen, you've unmuted. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I find it very hard to not agree with the council officers on the basis that the height will actually go up to 3.3 metres. But on the other hand, it is overdevelopment. So therefore I will be voting against as well.
Okay, thank you. So I think what, if it's okay, Sharon, are we okay to go through the recommendation as it is, which is to approve, and then take a vote on that, and then move, depending on what the outcome of that is, possibly to a motion for refusal. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. So as I call each councillor's name, if you could please switch on your microphone and camera and indicate if you would be voting for, against or abstaining. abstaining. So first of all to Councillor Allen, please.
Against.
And Councillor Burke.
Abstain.
And Councillor Clare.
Against.
And Councillor Foster.
Against.
Councillor Gallagher.
Against.
Councillor Garinga.
Against.
Councillor Haldane.
Against.
Councillor Shields.
Against.
Councillor Whitehead.
Against.
And Councillor Heffernan.
I'm going to abstain on this vote.
Thank you. So that's no votes for, 8 votes against and 2 abstentions.
Thank you. So that has fallen, and we now have the opportunity to put any alternative motions forward. Councillor Shields, you earlier on alighted on some wording for a possible motion for refusal. Don't know if you want to restate those. If Andy's got anything to suggest once you've done that. Is that okay?
Thank you, Chair. For the purposes of the debate or the consideration, page 53, items 1.13. There are 2 paragraphs in semi-italic underneath it, pretexted as number 1 and number 2 in brackets. And what I believe, because we are only elected laymen after all, they really encapsulate the feeling of the residents. I think they encapsulate the feeling of the committee. And I wonder if there is a form of words or look to provisionally adopt the 2 paragraph as our reasons of refusal and ask the planning staff to form that into a cogent statement for refusal.
Thank you, Councillor. Andy, are you okay to work with that?
Chair, to be perfectly frank, I think the paragraph 1.13 and those 2 sub-paragraphs within there, I think perfectly, sum up what I've written down in terms of members' feelings about this application tonight, and I think we can use both reasons in their entirety as worded in the committee report. If that was members' wishes tonight, if somebody is going to propose a motion that this application is refused on those grounds, then I think they would still hold water, as it were. If it were challenged at appeal, and of course we don't know what the applicant's intentions are, Chair.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So, Tony, with that, are you okay to propose that?
I will reprise. I will propose that. It's getting late, obviously. I'd like to thank Mr. Webber for his comments on that, because I think what we've spoken about tonight, and I think he's dead right, is realistically we're trying to dance and dress around a thing that we all know this is flaming awful. And we're trying to dress it up in nice planning words because planners are nice people. We know that. But I think it's been number 1 and number 2 are ideal. And I'll stop waffling now.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. What we do need is someone to second that. And feel free to shout out.
I'll second it.
Okay, so that's seconded by Councillor Allen. So, Sharon, is that okay to go through to the vote now with those? I don't want to propose that we read out the entire paragraph, but if we can take a vote on those 2 paragraphs as the reasons for refusal.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Chair. So we're now voting to refuse the application on the grounds that Councillor Shields has proposed and Councillor Allen has seconded. So when I call your name, if you could please confirm whether you are voting for, against or abstaining. So first of all, I'd like to turn to Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Burke.
Abstain.
Councillor Clare. Didn't hear you. Sorry, Councillor Clare.
Sorry, I had an issue with my microphone. This is the vote in favour of the motion.
This is for the motion to refuse on the grounds that Councillor Shields has outlined.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
For.
Councillor Gallagher.
For.
Councillor Garinga.
4.
Councillor Haldane.
4.
Councillor Shields.
4.
Councillor Whitehead.
4.
And Councillor Heffernan.
4.
Thank you. So that's 9 votes for and 1 abstention. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So that is that motion to refuse is now carried, and that application has been refused. Before we end for the night, we do have some urgent business that Mr. Webber wants us to come in on, and then once that's over, we'll then adjourn for the night. But Mr. Webber.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm mindful of the time, and thank you, councillors, for your patience. It's just really to remind you, we have 2 major public inquiries coming up this month. We have the Rosehill Secondary School public inquiry commencing on the 9th of September and expected to run until the 16th of September. Then we have something of an interval before the Sheen Way public inquiry starts on the 29th of September and runs to the 7th of October. It's a not in-person inquiry, of course. It will all be held in a virtual platform, as we've become accustomed to over these last few months. And it'll be run not through the Google Meets function that you're used to here, but the Planning Inspectorate run Microsoft Teams. Apparently that can take several hundred people, so which I think is important, particularly because of the public interest in both cases, but I think perhaps more so in the case of Sheen Way. I'd imagine there's going to be quite a lot of people listening into that. So that was all I really wanted to say, Chair, just to let members know, those of you who sat on the various planning committees for these applications, just to let you know that the public inquiries are coming up. It's going to be a busy month. So, yeah, that was all I really wanted to say. I don't know if Sarah's still on the call. She might have some further details about joining the public inquiry as a kind of an observer, shall we say.
Thanks, Andy. Yes, if we haven't sent out any of the letters in regards to the Sheen Way inquiry yet, but letters have gone out to residents in regards to the Rosehill. What you'll need to do if you do want to join is to email the inspectorate, which is Alison Dyson. If anyone wants a spelling of that, you can email me and I can pass that on to you. You'll just need to register with the inspector to say that you would like to join, whether or not you'd like to speak or you would just like to have access to view the meeting, and they will send you your own notification on how to join the meeting starting on the 7th. And as I said, we will send out communications in regards to Sheen Way, and I assume it will be exactly the same process where you'll email the inspectorate and ask to either speak or just to view the inquiry.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions now, but of course you can email either myself, Sarah, or Gavin Chinia. Any questions you have about either of these inquiries, between now and during the time which they're going to be carrying on in the next month and a bit. That was all I had, Chair.
Thank you. I've just got a really quick question about, is there any opportunity to see this afterwards, like we do with our committees, where we live stream on YouTube and then it's available to view afterwards, or do people have to be there as it happens to observe what happens during the day?
I believe that you'll have to be present during the meeting to see it. It isn't recorded. There's no live streaming, so it's only if you are on the inquiry to view it.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions on these, or shall we adjourn for the evening? Okay, I can't see another chat box. Okay, so that's it for tonight. Thank you very much for all the officers who've presented and for all of our speakers who've come to join us tonight, and particularly those of you who've been watching this on YouTube. The next meeting is I don't really know, actually. Is a few weeks' time. But I will look forward to